Here we go.
Hold on.
And we're back. Welcome back. You talk about DJ Lagway off the air, but welcome back to the College Football Review with you. There we go. Get the finger there. You. I'm Trav. That's Don Steven for the next half hour. We're going to talk about this past week 4 in college football, the week that was. There were a lot of things that happened, of course. The big news, I guess, now, since this is Wednesday, we were supposed to have done the show earlier than now. This is Wednesday. Now we know Mike Gundy of Oklahoma State is out of a job, fired from Oklahoma State after losing to Tulsa, but that wasn't the reason why he was fired. He just wasn't winning games. It wasn't doing anything significant. In his 21st season with the program, now they'll be looking for a new coach. What are your thoughts on this?
The field generals fall. Pry and Gundy out. Pry came in with a defensive pedigree and a vision for Virginia Tech's revival, but vision without that, no victories. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the deal.
And Gundy, he was an institution at Oklahoma State, but institutions can rush. You know what I'm saying? After the Tulsa loss, he was bound that he was going to get fired. You know?
Yeah, I thought so. Anyways, I was wondering when he was going to get fired sometime this season because the team did not look good. He did get blasted by Oregon a couple of weeks ago. I think 60-something to 3. That's unacceptable, period, regardless of how you're standing at Oklahoma State. They're still the little brothers of Oklahoma because Oklahoma, the Sooners, are the number 1 team in the state. But still, Mike Gundy handed the ball off to Barry Sanders back in 1988 during his Heisman Trophy season. He was also passing that same ball to Hartley Dykes, the wide receiver. We know about those players if you look back in college football and then eventually the pro football games. You know what they had done, but Mike Gundy finally out. And that's how week 4 pretty much got started. Tulsa beating Oklahoma State for the first time since 1998 overall, but for the first time since 1951 in Stillwater. Back in the day when Oklahoma State was known as Oklahoma A&M. That's how long it has been. And that's what put the nail in the coffin. And that's why T. Boone Pickens from the grave said, you got to go. And he went. So that started the week of college football, week number 4. We kicked it off. Now the big statements. There were some big statements, I guess, in college football this past weekend. Week number 4. One of those statements, I guess, was Miami beating Florida in Coral Gables pretty much handily towards the end. But the game was a lot closer than the score indicated.
Yeah, I didn't know. They came at them hard. Miami gave them the business. I thought it was going to be a closer game, but it wasn't at all.
See, the final score, as I said, wasn't indicative of how well the Gators did play. But make sense overall because this whole season so far in college football hasn't really made a lot of sense. And I'm talking about we were talking last week, Notre Dame was 0-2, but they were still in the AP top 25 along with the coaches top 25. And I'm wondering how the hell is that the case? Now they're 1-2, but still they were 0-2 and they were 2 undefeated teams that I noted specifically. They were more than 2 overall, but 2 that I specifically talked about. North Carolina State was 3-0 at the time when we talked about it last week, and Nebraska was 3-0 at the same time. So the big statement of Florida losing to Miami, a 1-2 team coming off of a loss to South Florida, who Miami blasted last week, and Miami jumps Penn State, who was idle, LSU, who played a bad team but blew them out, and Miami jumps into the second spot because of that against a 1-2 Florida team with Billy Napier, their coach, on the hot seat. Now with the bye coming up, we don't know what's going on with him.
Yeah, but Miami was a defensive masterclass. You know what I'm saying? Miami defense held Florida 141 yards, 0 third down conversions. They had 4 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. It was a lockdown, baby.
Yeah, it was a lockdown, but once again, the game in the beginning, Miami started off fast and hard. They really dominated Florida. In fact, I think Florida only had 32 yards, period, during the first half. And Miami was absolutely dominant. But then in the second half, Florida seemed to have gotten it together, and they were able to run the ball effectively. They gouged the Canes a few times. And it was a lot like the Notre Dame game where Miami had to have a come to Jesus moment as a team and get everything back together and show that they could really put it down. They have the athletes to do it. Go ahead and do it. But Ruben Bain, that's the athlete, the best athlete on the field. It seems like every time they play anyone, Ruben Bain, their defensive end, is the guy. And it looks like he could be a top 10 or top 5 pick in the NFL draft. But with Florida, I'm not a Florida fan. Anyone who knows me knows that. I'm a Canes fan. But Florida really showed a lot. And I thought going into this game, it was going to prove whether Billy Napier needed to stay a little longer, get a few more games, or would it be heads off just because of the loss if it was an absolute blowout and they weren't inspired when they played. They did show that they wanted to play for him. They did show that they still were doing it for him. And it looked like it towards the end, but Miami was just too much for him. And I'm glad you mentioned the defense. They did their job. The running game certainly did their job. Mario Cristobal went to the offensive line and told them, I'm going to let you boys eat. Just settle down. And he let them eat as Mark Fletcher and Shamar Brown just absolutely grinded it out, pummeled the Gators almost into submission. Of course, it was submission. They lost the game. But Carson Beckett should be more of the story. This guy I do not trust as a Miami Hurricane fan. I know Miami Hurricane fans may come after me because of that. I do not trust Carson Beck to be the quarterback to lead Miami to anything significant this year. It's unfortunate, but I think that's true. I hope I'm lying, but the last 2 seasons that he was at Georgia, I wasn't lying. He's a local guy from here in Jacksonville. I watched him as a high school player. He won a state championship. He was a 4-star quarterback. Stetson Bennett won the championships twice. He was behind him, so you thought he was learning. And then he plays the way he played, and people talk about he only lost 3 games during the time he was at Georgia. But then you think about it, if you watch these games, he was worse in wins than he was in losses on occasion. So the numbers can't really tell you exactly what was going on until you watched it, but I certainly wasn't impressed. And I don't think the coaching staff was overly impressed with him either, because as he was throwing and losing confidence, and you saw him losing that confidence, they started throwing these bubble screens. They started doing all of these high percentage passes, trying not to let him screw it up. They were giving draw plays to the running backs on 3rd and 6 and plays like that. They did not trust him anymore. And I wonder how much longer that's going to last, because on October 4th, they're going on their first road game of the season, by the way, against their huge rivals, the Florida State Seminoles in Tallahassee. And that's my spiel. Those are some of the big statements that were made. As you see, we got a little graphic up that says big statements. That was a big statement, kind of, sort of, but I think the bigger statement was Texas Tech beating Nebraska, Texas Tech beating Utah, in Utah of all places.
Oh, it's to me that you threw it to me.
I threw it to you, and you dropped it.
I didn't drop it. I'm just trying to find out how Texas Tech did that game, so I can relay it to our peoples properly. That was a master. They dusted the Utes off, 34-10. You know what I'm saying? They crushed Utah. You know what I'm saying? So, Will Hammond was the man. You know what I'm saying? His heroics. He stepped up and lit up the sky for 169 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 61 rushing yards. The kid didn't blink. He led 4 scoring drives like a seasoned general. That's Will the Whip Hammond.
Yeah, I tell you what, Baron Morton got injured and Hammond came in. And Will Hammond has come in the past. This guy's still a freshman. I don't know how long he's going to be a freshman. I don't know what's going on these days. Dude's a freshman for like 3 or 4 years. I don't know. You throw in the COVID year, whatever year, however many years. COVID's been so far removed. You wonder if this dude's getting his doctorate as a freshman. He's been in for so long, but he did come in. And I wonder now, does a quarterback lose his job because of injury or because you have the hot hand? Roll with that hot hand. Now, before this, there wasn't necessarily a hot hand because you were playing bad teams. Playing Kent State is a bad team. Get these blowouts like they were getting with playing bad team. But now you're playing a good team, a very good team. In fact, some claim that this was the best offensive line at Utah in the Madison era. And it didn't matter. They couldn't run as effectively as they thought they could. They didn't pass, apparently. And you saw Texas Tech just came in. Texas Tech needs to now be taken serious, like a lot of the other teams that are considered name brand teams. And Texas Tech, by the way, if you don't know anything, then they got commitments. Now that NIL and the transfer portal, they've gotten commitments from one of the 5-star offensive linemen and a 5-star linebacker coming into the 2026 class. So this is probably the beginning of something big for what they're doing down the line.
Yeah, Texas Tech that's the home of Patrick Mahomes, right?
Texas Tech, the home of Patrick Mahomes, of course. Yes. And Baker Mayfield in the beginning, he transferred.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But they had their defensive domination. They forced 4 turnovers and held Utah to 263 yards. And it was a statement. It wasn't just a win, it was a warning. Texas Tech 4-0, baby. Yeah, 1-0 in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And they climbing fast.
And they passed the eyeball test. I'll tell you what, they really passed the eyeball test because I did not expect them to go on the road. And you think about a lot of the things, not just the players and the skill sets. You think about things you don't control, like the altitude. Playing in Utah, they were able to overcome that. It's like playing a mile-high stadium. There's an inherent advantage playing in that high altitude. People who aren't used to it get tired a lot quicker. These boys played like it was nothing different from what they were doing down in Lubbock, and they were able to pull off the win. So another one of these big statement games that I wasn't really necessarily thinking about in terms of being a huge game, I guess just because of the numbers in terms of what ranking these two teams were, Illinois and Indiana. I didn't think Illinois needed to be ranked as high, but Indiana, well, not necessarily them either, considering that they lost their quarterback from last season. But Fernando Mendoza comes from California, goes to Indiana, and now he looks like one of the leading Heisman Trophy candidates right now. 14 touchdowns, no picks. He threw for 5 touchdowns against Illinois and absolutely sparked them, 63-10. That's insane. I wasn't expecting that.
That was crazy. Quarterback they had a special team disaster, block punt return for a touchdown, and that's how the game just got started, and it just got worse from there.
Yeah, it went downhill from there. And I tell you what, another thing about Fernando Mendoza, he's so intelligent, he can pick up these schemes. This guy turned down coming out of high school, Columbus High School, by the way, in Miami, is the alma mater of Mario Cristobal, the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes. He chose to go to Cal Berkeley, which is also an exceptional academic institution. He turns down Yale to go there. And then when he decided to transfer, I thought this might be a good opportunity for Miami to get a second bite at the apple. Bring him home. Let him quarterback. Forget Carson Beck. But no, he wanted to go to Indiana. He wanted to go to Indiana because his brother is an offensive lineman there. Surprise, surprise. But definitely, he fits in perfectly like a glove in Kirk Cignetti's offense. I mean, just perfectly. He got 5 touchdowns last week against Indiana State, Larry Bird's alma mater. I said, come on, that's 5 touchdowns against Indiana State. But then he comes back the following week against Illinois, 5 more touchdowns. This dude, if you're talking about a leading Heisman Trophy candidate, he probably is near or at the top of the list. Indiana, another team you need to look at as an improving, or if not, a pretty damn good team who probably deserves to be in the top 10, top 12, or whatever you're having. The top 12 teams go to the playoff this year, the CFP, which has been expanded. They certainly probably are punching their ticket early, but there's a long ways to go. But I think they have a lot of confidence now.
Yeah, it definitely was a momentum shift. You know what I'm saying? Illinois was 3-0 and ranked number 9. Now they 3-1 and sliding, and they got USC next week. It wasn't just a loss; it was a reality check.
And you look at these offensive numbers, and everybody likes the offense. Offense is what put butts in seats, but defense wins championships. 7 sacks against Illinois. That's part of winning championships. If you're going to have designs on getting a championship, 7 sacks. They allowed 2 yards rushing. That was serious business at home. I would like to see that moving forward, see how that plays out. But those are some of those big statement games. And I guess I don't even know if it's a statement game. We're still in the first topic, big statements. There were a lot of statements made in week 4. Clemson going up to Syracuse, or actually Syracuse coming down to Clemson and beating Clemson. this Clemson team was expected to be one of the best teams in the country going into this season, an alleged Heisman Trophy candidate in K. Klubnik, and it's been nothing but a disaster ever since. Dabo Swinney doesn't like the fans. The fans no longer like Dabo Swinney. Before, it was a cute back and forth between the coaches and the players, coaches and the fans. Now it's getting a bit tenuous. Things are looking bad. They're 1-3. People are talking about Dabo must go. Well, with the $60 million buyout, does Dabo go?
$63 million. That's a lot of scratch, baby boy. But Dabo's empire is under siege. His trajectory post Trevor Lawrence, since Lawrence left, the magic's been missing. Dabo's gone from wizard to wanderer, and the map's looking blurry.
Well, let's not forget Deshaun Watson was there too, so he had a knack for getting these great quarterbacks. And DJ, I don't like mentioning his last name, but DJ was one of those quarterbacks that was the top quarterback in the country. He came to Clemson, didn't do anything. I spoke about that. He went to Clemson, then he went to Oregon State, then he went to Florida State. Didn't do anything anywhere. So now I think he tried playing tight end in the NFL, wasn't drafted, I don't think. But anyway, I don't think that worked out either. But it's just I don't know if it's a shame or not, because you're talking about a $60 million buyout. You know, Dabo did sign a 10-year, $115 million contract, so no one's going to be in the soup line anytime soon. If you look a couple of years ago, Jimbo Fisher was bought out by Texas A&M for about $77 million. These teams have money to throw around, depending on the team. You have those oil boys in Texas, so whether it's Texas A&M or the Longhorns, they have the scratch to get you to scratch out of there if you're not playing up to par. And so that's what it looks like. But Dabo's in a nice situation, pretty good, bad situation, because he's looking over in Alabama, where he's from, where he played back in the 1992 National Championship game. Well, he was on the team. He didn't play, but he has that closeness playing on that team, being on that team, 1992, the team that beat Miami 34-13. And he's more than happy to come home. So he's looking at Kellen DeBoer, wondering, well, Kellen DeBoer has a $70 million buyout, just in case anyone wanted to know if he was going to leave Alabama at this point, because it goes down every year, because more, every year you stay is a year you don't have to pay. So he's kind of looking at that job. If DeBoer gets replaced, if he continues to blow what's going on, and that could easily start this Saturday when they go to Athens to take on the Georgia Bulldogs, it could really sour a lot of people, and they'll be back in the camp of get rid of him. Dabo Swinney could fill that void.
Yeah, I've been hearing DeBoer has his eye on one of them, on an ACC team possibly.
He shouldn't have his eye on anything. This is only his second year. Prove something.
Yeah, I mean, he came in under a lot of pressure after, following the footsteps of my bag. I see his commercials all the time.
Nick Saban.
Nick Saban. I see his commercials all the time. He big shoes to fill, and he hasn't filled them yet. And like you always say about Dabo, in this age of NIL and transfer, is Dabo playing checkers and the rest of the ACC playing chess? He got to get with it.
He has been for a while, but he's been winning. The deal is, he was one of the few coaches that wasn't going into the transfer portal. I think he finally went this past season and got 3 players out. But you see how it's changing. Deion Sanders got over 80 players out when he started with Colorado. You look at Bill Belichick, he got about 30 or 40 players out of there. So these guys know how to do it. You're going to have to fall in line and not just get players for the sake of getting players. You got to get players who are quality players, because remember, the people who typically go into the transfer portal, especially from the lesser schools, are probably not up to par for whatever level you're on. See, Dabo Swinney used to say that the people who are leaving, well, they wouldn't make our team anyway. He was easily getting away with that. But what about those top players who do leave for whatever reason or another that the other schools are getting that you could have gotten? You chose not to do it. And then you see them blowing up. Like a Jamison Williams that was playing for Ohio State, came down to Alabama. Dabo Swinney could have been in the sweepstakes for him and could have had him on his team and had a dominant wide receiver. But, he's more interested in telling family members how he treasures their player, their family member, and how he'll look out for them. He's not going to just throw them on the trash heap because some guy from the outside comes in. Well, that happens in recruiting anyway, naturally. But anyway, that was part of our buyout segment. We kind of slipped into that without having to say buyouts. Well, we mentioned these buyouts.
Buyout.
Yeah, players that are not, the coaches who have these buyouts, and then some of these coaches who were fired. We talked about last week, fired coaches. Deshaun, what's his name out there? Deshaun Foster at UCLA was fired last week. And we didn't talk about Brent Pry of Virginia Tech getting fired like he did after the 0-3 start. And now we have Mike Gundy getting fired. I'm sure there are more to come getting fired, but I wonder, will it be during the season or will they wait until the end of the season? I'm talking about coaches who are substantive, at least a coach in the Power Four.
Yeah, they like we said before, they both went down, Pry went out, Gundy went out. It's not just about two firings, it's about the tectonics of college football shifting. The loyalty is out, results is in. You know what I mean? We don't know, what they're trying to build, if they're building or if it's all going to burn down. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. College football changed so much in such a short period of time, and this is what we're left with. And I don't know, if you're a diehard, you don't like it. If you're a newbie, your team wasn't doing good before. Now it is. Like Vandy fans, they love this because they're undefeated right now. Who ever heard of an undefeated Vandy team other than before the season started when everybody's undefeated? Now they're 4-0. Vandy, and it's the Diego Pavia sensation who's the reason why they're winning these games, because if you watch this guy, the numbers don't show you anything. You have to watch him in person. But let's get to our fraud alert, because there were two frauds that I talked about them a little earlier. And we're talking about Nebraska, who was 3-0, and I was wondering why they weren't on the coaches poll, why they weren't in the AP poll. North Carolina State, the same story. But then the next game, they both get blasted. Oh, well, Nebraska didn't necessarily get blasted. Michigan just ran on them at will and sacked their quarterback at will and just dominated them and allowed them to hang around in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Lincoln, Nebraska. Yeah,
right.
that was another one, boy. College football, like you said, college football has changed in such a short time. You know what I mean? They made it a lot fun for the non-diehard. You know what I mean? Because there was a lot of complications with the voting for, voting to see who be number one, who go to the championship. The bowl games have changed, so the playoffs is really inviting to the casual fan. So the casual fan is
casual fan whose team probably had done well in the transfer portal. So now they're going from not winning to winning. Diego Pavia, as I mentioned, came from New Mexico State, goes to Vanderbilt, had a sensational year last year, beats Alabama and Tuscaloosa, beats Virginia Tech when Virginia Tech was at least looked at as being a decent team, beating them in Nashville. And now this year they beat South Carolina. They're 4-0 now. Hey, some things just don't change as long as you have Diego Pavia on your team. So that fraud alert, going back to Nebraska playing Michigan, I mean, Michigan was able to run the ball on them unimpeded. Whatever happened to the black shirts, I thought was coming back. Justice Haynes averaged over 8 yards a carry on these guys. They couldn't stop anyway, anything. And they would just run through and run over and go into North Carolina State. Man, I just gave CJ Bang this big shout out last week, but I've been shouting him out since he was a true freshman last year. Now he's a true sophomore this year. But those 3 interceptions contributed directly to them losing the game and their undefeated record. So I guess somebody knew something by not putting them in either poll, because now they're definitely not in either poll with these extra losses on their record. Now, let's talk about the Heisman race, because the Heisman race is coming up. This has been, in my opinion, one of the weakest Heisman races that I can remember. There isn't any really great players. There's some solid players. I don't know why it's turning out like this, but wow, there's really nothing to really hold you outside of the teams who have the player. People who really don't, and people who are paid to know, no one really cares about these players. There isn't anyone who stands out that seems like they're transcendent. When Barry Sanders in 1988, he was so transcendent. You couldn't wait to watch his highlights if you were outside of his market. Charles Woodson, when he was playing both sides of the ball. Even Desmond Howard, even though he was a kick returner and a wide receiver, you like to see him in punt returner. There was always this pop out there that you wanted to see. And there isn't anyone there, but there's still, I guess, relatively speaking, there are people in this Heisman Trophy race. And I think if I had a leader right now, incidentally, 2 Latinos are in the top 2, in my opinion. And I mentioned one of them already, and that's Fernando Mendoza. So far, so good. 14 touchdowns, no interceptions, back-to-back weeks of 5 touchdowns, even though one was Indiana State. But he proved his point against Illinois, who was ranked. We'll see what USC does against this Illinois team now that they're going to be playing them this weekend as well. And then another one, Joey Aguiar from Tennessee. Well, now he's with Tennessee. He's been with 4 different schools, and that's another dynamic we have to deal with. All of these different players, all of these different schools, blah, blah, blah. You know, he played at San Francisco Community College as a junior college player. O.J. Simpson's alma mater when he came out of Galileo High School when he was a high school kid. Then he went to, I think, El Diablo, someplace called El Diablo. And from there, he went to Appalachian State, which he did do some good things because Appalachian State does have a decent team. Now he's at Tennessee. And it reminded me of like another Tennessean, but basketball, Dalton Connect. He went around everywhere too before he ended up at Tennessee as a basketball player, ends up getting drafted by the Lakers. So this is the new thing in college sports, period, not just relegated to football. And that leads me to, well, and I tell you, I just mentioned just 2 of them, but who would be other people who would be on this list? John Mateer from Oklahoma, but he's having hand surgery. He'll be out for a while. There goes his Heisman Trophy chances. He's not there. So I would throw in somebody like Ruben Bain, who I mentioned earlier, a real possibility. You gotta throw in that token defensive guy. You know, years ago when they had Ndamukong Suh coming out of Nebraska, you threw him in there, but he deserved it. So I'm throwing in Ruben Bain being the homer, but he's living up to expectations right now. Why the hell not? Everything else is falling apart. He's just not falling apart just yet. And so that's somebody I can check out. And that's my list. If I had a top 4 list, it would be him, or I was going to have Mateer up there, but being injured as he is, he won't be up there much longer. And then I have my Dynamite Dozen. Dynamite Dozen. Let me I think I have to look at a sheet of paper on this one because I just have bullet points, as you can see on our little graphic there. Starting from number 12 up, because there are 12 teams that will be going into the playoffs. I'm just going to name the teams. I have Oklahoma at number 12. I know Oklahoma fans are going to get pissed off. We just had 10 sacks against Auburn. We need to be higher. No, not just yet. There's a whole lot of the season left, and you will be Oklahoma soon enough. The Red River rivalry is coming. Don't worry. Texas will have you. I don't think Texas is going to win, but we'll see. You know, you never know. Indiana, number 11. Texas A&M, number 10. Texas Tech, on the heels of beating the hell out of Utah in Utah, number 9. Penn State, number 7. I know Penn State fans don't like that, but come on, man. Who the hell have you played? I mean, come on, Drew Aller, however we want to mention his name, he's okay. He has a lot to prove. We'll see. This is still a good time to make your mistakes. And then later on, you'll see if he lived up to whatever expectations are there for him. He might even make the Heisman list, man. We got so much time left. And then Oregon. I know Oregon should be higher. And after this week, we're talking about some big games being played. Oregon is playing, who the hell is Oregon playing? Penn State this week. So that's a huge game as well. So we'll find out a lot about both of them.
Be a good game. I want to see that one.
Yep. And then I have Oregon, well, right in front of Penn State. So we'll have that settled soon enough. And then Florida State. Florida State at number 5. Georgia at number 4. LSU at number 3, Miami at number 2, and then Ohio State, the defending champs. You got to beat the champ to be the champ. So in that regard, we got our Dynamite Dozen set, and I said my look ahead. The look ahead was some of those games I mentioned. That Penn State-Oregon game, a huge game. And, you know, you have Ole Miss is playing LSU. LSU going to Ole Miss in Oxford, a huge game there. Alabama going to Athens to play Georgia, another huge game there. And bro, we about to come to an end on this here. But anyways, that's week 4 for you. So yeah, I call it we call it the Church of Trav. That's what I want to call this, because you have been given the gospel. And I probably would use Bible verses on it. And with that, Well, that's my little Oregon there. And the reason why I even do that, because we got to give a shout out to the coaches who no longer have their jobs. Unfortunately, they lost their jobs. It's never a good time when they lose their jobs, but it also gives the opportunity to say, hey, it's over. It's over.
It's over. It's over. I ain't going down. It's over. It's finished. It's done. It's over. I can shout 'cause it's over. I can dance 'cause it's over.
Yes.
It's over.
It's over, baby.
It's over, boys. And just like that, our show's about to come to an end.